Did you know there is a confirmed meteor impact crater buried beneath the Chicago suburbs, 8 miles wide, sitting under 200 feet of glacial sediment, and you have almost certainly driven directly over it? Or that in the year 1100, while William the Conqueror was rewriting European history, there was a city in Illinois larger than London, and its original name has been completely lost to history? Illinois sits at the center of what America buried and forgot. It is the burial ground for a lost metropolis, a submerged meteor, a fault line that rang church bells 1,000 miles away, and institutions that swallowed people whole and never fully accounted for them. Most people drive I-55 from Chicago to St. Louis and think they are looking at nothing. They are driving over the top of a civilization, a catastrophe waiting to repeat itself, and one of the strangest creatures science has ever tried to name. So settle in, because we are diving into secrets about Illinois that will completely change how you see the prairie state. Stick around to the very end, because what we saved for last is documented, devastating, and has never been fully explained. Coming in at number 22, the city under the cornfield. Here is what nobody taught you in any American history class. Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, located near Collinsville, Illinois, approximately 8 miles east of St. Louis, is the largest pre-Columbian archaeological site in North America. At its peak, the city covered nearly 4,000 acres, encompassed roughly 120 earthen mounds, and supported a population of 10,000 to 20,000 people. That is larger than London, England at the same time. Monk's Mound, the central structure, stands 100 feet tall, covers more than 14 acres at its base, and contains more material by volume than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built by hand in Illinois before Columbus was born. UNESCO designated Cahokia a World Heritage Site in 1982. The city was abandoned by approximately 1350 CE. Researchers at Washington University in St. Louis and the Illinois State Archaeological Survey have excavated less than 1% of the site. London had roughly 18,000 people in the year 1100. Cahokia, Illinois, had 20,000. Then it was abandoned, and then America forgot it existed. At number 21, the fault that rang bells 1,000 miles away. The New Madrid seismic zone extends from northeast Arkansas through Missouri and directly into southern Illinois, terminating near Cairo. Between December 1811 and February 1812, it produced 3 earthquakes with estimated magnitudes of 7.0 or greater. Seismologists at the Center for Earthquake Research and Information at the University of Memphis have documented that the shaking intensity during that sequence was 2 to 3 times greater than the 1964 Alaska earthquake, and approximately 10 times greater than the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Church bells rang on their own in Boston and Washington, D.C. The Mississippi River reportedly reversed course. Sand blows from the event are still visible on the surface today. The USGS currently documents a 25 to 40% probability of a magnitude 6.0 or greater earthquake in the next 50 years, in a region where almost none of the buildings were designed for seismic events. California has the building codes. Southern Illinois has the fault. Most of the buildings down there were built as if it doesn't exist. Landing at number 20, the crater under Chicago's suburbs. Here is what Hollywood never told you about the ground beneath Des Plaines, Illinois. The Des Plaines impact structure, documented by the Illinois State Geological Survey and listed in the Earth Impact Database, maintained by the Planetary and Space Science Center at the University of New Brunswick, is a confirmed buried meteorite impact crater sitting 17 miles west of downtown Chicago. It is 8 kilometers wide. It covers roughly 25 square miles of shattered bedrock. It formed less than 280 million years ago. The crater was first noticed in the 1890s by water well drillers encountering anomalous geology. Its impact origin was confirmed in 1986 by researchers, including J.F. McCone, through the identification of shatter cones, a diagnostic feature of hypervelocity impact found nowhere else in nature. The crater has no surface expression. It is entirely buried under 75 to 200 feet of glacial drift. You cannot see it. 1 million people commute past it every single day and have no idea it is there. They confirmed impact origin in 1986. It is on every major geological database. Nobody has put up a sign. There is an 8-mile wide meteor crater under the Chicago suburbs, confirmed since 1986, documented by the Illinois State Geological Survey, and almost nobody who lives above it knows it exists. This channel is considerably easier to find than a buried impact structure. Hit subscribe. It is free. You do not need a seismic survey to locate it. Fact 19. The monster nobody could name. In 1955, an amateur fossil hunter named Francis Tully was exploring shale spoil piles at a coal mine near Braidwood, Illinois, when he split open a siderite concretion and found a creature unlike anything he or any scientist had ever seen. Tube-shaped body, proboscis ending in a claw-like jaw, eyes mounted on a rigid horizontal bar extending from its sides. He took it to the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. The scientists were stumped. The creature, officially named Tullimonstrum gregarium, the Tully monster, was formally described in scientific literature in 1966. For the next 50 years, paleontologists could not classify it. Worm, mollusk, arthropod. In 2016, a team from Yale University, the Field Museum, and Argonne National Laboratory published findings in Nature, concluding it was a vertebrate, an early jawless fish related to the modern lamprey. The Field Museum holds over 2,000 specimens, the largest collection in the world. The Tully monster is found only in Illinois. It has never been found anywhere else on Earth. In 1989, the Illinois state legislature named it the official state fossil. They found thousands of them. They named it the state fossil. They still are not entirely sure what it was. Number 18, the safest mine in America. On November 13, 1909, approximately 480 men and boys reported for work at the Cherry Mine in Cherry, Illinois, operated by the St. Paul Coal Company, a mine publicly advertised as the safest in America. At midday, a cart loaded with hay brushed a kerosene lantern. Fire spread to the mine timbers. 200 men escaped initially. The ventilation fan, which should have drawn smoke out, was reversed in a desperate attempt to fight the fire, pushing flames deeper. Rescue crews were driven back by toxic gas. When the mine was sealed to suffocate the fire, 21 men were entombed alive. 8 days later, the 8-day men, as they came to be known, were found alive in a sealed section, having survived without food and barely any water. Final death toll: 259 men and boys, including 4 children employed illegally under Illinois law. The St. Paul Coal Company was fined $630 for 9 violations of child labor law, $70 per dead child. The disaster led directly to the creation of the U.S. Bureau of Mines in 1910, the Illinois Workmen's Compensation Act of 1911, and federal child labor law reform. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire owns the labor reform narrative in American history education. The Cherry Mine disaster, which killed more people 2 years earlier and forced the Bureau of Mines into existence, is almost unknown outside Illinois. The safest mine in America killed 259 people. The survivors got a new law. The dead got a monument that took 60 years to build. Coming in at number 17, the Fireproof Theater. Here is what Hollywood never told you about December 30th, 1903. The Iroquois Theater at 24 West Randolph Street in Chicago's Loop had opened just 5 weeks earlier. It was advertised as absolutely fireproof. Chicago's building commissioner and fire inspector had toured it in November and declared it fireproof beyond all doubt. On December 30th, a standing-room-only holiday matinee, attended by approximately 1,700 people, many of them women and children, was underway, when an arc light broke and ignited a muslin curtain backstage. The fire lasted approximately 15 minutes. 602 people died. Fire exits were unmarked, blocked, or fitted with European brace locks that panicked Americans had never encountered. The smoke vents above the stage were nailed shut. There were no sprinklers. When the fire chief entered the building afterward and called out, "Is anybody alive in here?" there was no response. Bodies were found piled at blocked exits. A grand jury indicted 5 men. Evidence suggested city inspectors had accepted free theater tickets in exchange for overlooking safety violations. All charges were dismissed. 0 convictions. Every panic bar on every fire exit in America exists because of what happened in the Iroquois Theater on December 30th, 1903. 5 men indicted, 0 convicted, 602 dead. There is one more Illinois institution that failed the people inside it in a way that has never been fully explained. In 1902, a state hospital opened in Bartonville, Illinois, for patients deemed incurably insane. What the first superintendent of that hospital personally witnessed and documented in writing, at a funeral, in front of hundreds of staff and patients, has never been satisfactorily accounted for. We will get there. At number 16, the building that should not exist. Starved Rock State Park in LaSalle County contains 18 canyons carved from Ordovician sandstone, with walls rising up to 100 feet. According to Illinois State Geological Survey documentation, these canyons were not carved by gradual river erosion. Approximately 14,000 years ago, moraine dams holding vast proglacial lakes across northern Illinois collapsed. The resulting catastrophic floods carved through ancient ocean sandstone in what geologists describe as a geologically instantaneous event, producing the canyon walls, the 80-foot Illinois River bluffs, and the rock formations that now define the park in what amounted to a single catastrophic release of water. The park's name refers to a documented historical event. In 1769, a group of Illinois people were besieged on the rock formation by warriors from rival nations and starved to death rather than descend. The canyons were carved by a catastrophic flood in a day, 14,000 years ago. Illinois calls them a scenic attraction. The geology calls them a scar. Landing at number 15, the 3 women in St. Louis Canyon. On the morning of March 14, 1960, 3 women from Riverside, Illinois, Frances Murphy, 47, Mildred Lindquist, 50, and Lillian Oding, 50, set out on a hiking excursion at Starved Rock State Park during a 4-day holiday trip. They were found 2 days later in St. Louis Canyon, beaten to death with a tree branch, their wrists bound, their bodies partially covered by snow that had fallen that night. The Illinois State Police investigation was documented in Chicago Magazine as plagued by institutional failure. The Illinois Crime Lab could not locate 2 victims' rings for weeks, later found in an unpacked glove. Bloody fingerprints on the victim's clothing were not promptly reported. Hair found in a victim's hand was initially misidentified as female until a second examination determined it came from 2 males. The controversy led to the wholesale reform of the Illinois Crime Lab. Chester Wager, a 21-year-old dishwasher at the Starved Rock Lodge, confessed in October 1960. He recanted before trial, claiming coercion. He was convicted of murdering Lillian Oding and sentenced to life. He spent 60 years in prison maintaining his innocence. He died on June 22, 2025, at age 86. A LaSalle County judge denied his petition for exoneration. The park is still open. St. Louis Canyon is still on the trail map. The hair from 2 unidentified males was never explained. At number 14, the world that coal miners found by accident. The Mazon Creek fossil beds of northeastern Illinois, spanning 6 counties centered on Grundy County, approximately 60 miles southwest of Chicago, are classified by the National Park Service as one of the 5 most important fossil Lagerstätten on Earth. Lagerstätten are sites of exceptional preservation, where soft-bodied organisms that almost never fossilize were captured in extraordinary detail. The deposits date to approximately 307 to 309 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, when Illinois was a tropical coastal swamp near the equator. The Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago holds nearly 65,000 specimens, the largest single Mazon Creek collection in the world. 512 animal species from 14 different phyla. More biological diversity documented in one Illinois rock formation than most countries have documented in their living ecosystems. Most of the site was exposed by strip mining between 1928 and 1974. Without the coal industry accidentally uncovering it, it would still be buried. Coal miners accidentally uncovered one of the 5 most important fossil sites on the planet. It took 50 years and X-ray machines from Argonne National Laboratory to identify what they found in it. Fact 13. The road that swallowed America. Here's what Hollywood never told you about Route 66. The official starting point of U.S. Route 66 is the intersection of Adams Street and Michigan Avenue in Chicago. The road runs 301 miles through Illinois, the longest single state stretch in its original alignment, before crossing into Missouri, passing through Joliet, Pontiac, Bloomington Normal, Springfield, and Litchfield. Route 66 was commissioned on November 11, 1926. The road was fully paved by 1938. Between 1930 and 1940, an estimated 210,000 Dust Bowl refugees traveled it westward through Illinois. John Steinbeck called it the Mother Road in The Grapes of Wrath. The mythology belongs to New Mexico, Arizona, and California. The starting point marker is still at Michigan and Adams. The Mother Road starts in Illinois. The mythology starts in New Mexico. Illinois has never once complained about this arrangement. At number 12, the earthquake nobody is ready for. A scenario study published by the University of Illinois Mid-America Earthquake Center in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Report 09-3, models a deterministic magnitude 7.7 earthquake on the New Madrid seismic zone. The modeled impacts to Illinois alone include catastrophic structural failure of unreinforced masonry buildings across southern Illinois, bridge failures on I-57, I-64, and I-24, pipeline ruptures serving the greater St. Louis metro area, and communication blackouts across 8 states. FEMA has used this scenario for catastrophic planning exercises. The USGS currently documents a 25 to 40% probability of a magnitude 6.0 or greater event in the next 50 years. Illinois is among the states with the lowest rates of seismic building code adoption in the zone. The USGS has been documenting this probability for decades. The building codes in southern Illinois have not caught up. The fault does not care. Landing at number 11, where Lincoln became Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln arrived in Illinois in 1830 at age 21. He practiced law across the 8th Judicial Circuit, served in the state legislature, and lived in Springfield from 1837 until he departed for Washington in 1861. The Lincoln-Douglas debates, 7 debates across Illinois in 1858, established him nationally as the defining voice on the question of slavery's expansion. He was nominated for president in Chicago at the Republican National Convention in May 1860. He was assassinated on April 14, 1865, and brought home to Springfield, where he has been buried since May 4, 1865, at Oak Ridge Cemetery. Every formative political and legal conviction Abraham Lincoln ever formed was formed in this state. He was born in Kentucky. He grew up in Indiana. He became Abraham Lincoln entirely in Illinois. The license plates have always known this. Coming in at number 10, the machine that ended the hunger of nations. The McCormick Reaper Works opened in Chicago in 1847, and over the following decades, industrialized agricultural mechanization at a scale that changed human food production worldwide. By 1871, it was the largest factory in the city. It was destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire. It was rebuilt. Illinois currently produces approximately 2.2 billion bushels of corn per year. According to the USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service, the machinery that made that scale of production possible was built, burned, and rebuilt in Chicago. And on May 4, 1886, workers striking at that same factory were confronted by police. A bomb was thrown into police ranks. 7 officers died. The subsequent trial and execution of anarchist labor leaders became the founding event of the International Labor Movement's annual commemoration of May Day, May 1st, still observed in approximately 80 countries. The factory that built the machine that fed the world burned down in the Great Fire. They rebuilt it. Then it started a labor movement that now spans 80 countries. Illinois had a very busy century. At number 9, the lost name of the largest city. I have walked the grounds at Cahokia on a November afternoon when the light was flat and the mounds stood gray against a gray sky, and I could not process the fact that I was standing in what had been the most populous city in North America north of Mexico, and that the people who built it are gone in a way that leaves no answer behind. When French explorers arrived in the Illinois region in the late 17th century, the city that had dominated the Mississippi River Valley for 300 years had already been empty for 300 more. No oral tradition survived that named it. The people who constructed Monk's Mound, who traded obsidian from Yellowstone and copper from the Great Lakes, left no written record. Washington University in St. Louis and the Illinois State Archaeological Survey have excavated less than 1% of the site. Evidence suggests the city declined after 1200 CE. Deforestation, resource depletion, political fracture, flooding, or all of them. By 1350, it was empty. The name Cahokia was borrowed in the 18th century from a nearby Illiniwek sub-tribe that had no connection to the original builders. The largest city in North American history north of Mexico is nameless. We know what they built. We know how many of them there were. We do not know what they called themselves or their city. That information is gone. It is not coming back. Fact 8. The river that burns in winter. Every winter, thousands of bald eagles descend on the Illinois River Valley at and below Starved Rock State Park, and almost nobody outside Illinois knows it happens. The Illinois Natural History Survey documents this as part of the Mississippi Flyway, one of 4 major North American waterfowl corridors, with bald eagle winter populations in this corridor numbering in the thousands annually, one of the largest such concentrations in the Midwest. Between November and March, hundreds of thousands of ducks, geese, and pelicans join them. In January and February, the waterfalls inside the 18 sandstone canyons of Starved Rock freeze into ice formations, documented by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, drawing tens of thousands of visitors, thousands of bald eagles, every winter, in the same canyon that was carved by a catastrophic flood that happened in a day. Illinois has never once made this the lead story. There is one more Illinois story that involves an institution and an unexplained event, except that in this case, the unexplained event was documented in writing by the physician who ran the institution, in front of hundreds of witnesses at a patient's funeral in Bartonville, Illinois. We are almost there. At number 7, the nuclear reactor under the bleachers. Here is what Hollywood never told you about the Manhattan Project. On December 2nd, 1942, at 3:25 in the afternoon, a team of scientists led by Enrico Fermi achieved the world's first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction in a squash court under the west stands of Stagg Field, the abandoned football stadium at the University of Chicago. The reactor, designated Chicago Pile 1, used 45,000 graphite bricks, 19,000 uranium metal slugs, and 12,400 pounds of uranium oxide. It was built in 21 days. There was no containment structure. There was no emergency cooling system. There was no evacuation plan. The city did not know it was happening. Arthur Compton called Harvard physicist James Conant afterward in code, "The Italian navigator has just landed in the New World." The Manhattan Project, which culminated in the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, effectively began under a football stadium in Chicago. A Henry Moore sculpture called Nuclear Energy now marks the site. The first nuclear reactor in human history was built in 21 days under a Chicago football stadium in the middle of a city of 3 million people, with no containment structure on a Tuesday afternoon. Illinois changed the physics of the world, and the city didn't know it was happening. Coming in at number 6, the asylum at the center of the prairie. On February 10th, 1902, the Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane opened in Bartonville, Illinois, under the superintendency of Dr. George A. Zeller, a licensed physician who believed in humane treatment of the mentally ill at a time when most institutions relied on physical restraints, solitary confinement, and ice baths. Dr. Zeller removed bars from windows, prohibited restraints, and established a cottage system campus with 63 buildings, a bakery, a farm, and patient housing. By 1927, the hospital had admitted 13,510 patients. More than 2,000 are buried in 4 cemeteries on the hospital grounds. The hospital closed in 1972. 13 of the original 63 buildings remain standing. Dr. Zeller documented what he personally witnessed at the hospital in a book titled Befriending the Bereft, a verifiable, named, published account under his professional credentials, cited in every serious account of what happened at one particular funeral in the hospital's early years. He treated them with dignity when no one else did. He kept records. He wrote down everything he saw. Some of what he wrote down, no one has been able to explain. Fact 5. The Great Fire nobody remembers correctly. The Great Chicago Fire of October 8th through 10th, 1871, burned 3.3 square miles of the city, destroyed 17,450 buildings, killed an estimated 300 people, and left 100,000 Chicagoans homeless. The event is remembered for one thing. Catherine O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern in a barn on DeKoven Street and started it. The Chicago City Council officially exonerated Mrs. O'Leary and her cow in 1997, 126 years after the fact. The actual origin of the fire has never been definitively established. 3 investigations were conducted. No conclusion was reached. According to the Chicago History Museum, at least 4 competing theories of origin have credible evidence, including a report that a man named Daniel Peg Leg Sullivan started the fire accidentally. The cow story was invented by a newspaper reporter, the most famous fire in American history. The cause was never officially determined. The cow has been cleared. Nobody knows how it started. At number 4, the river that reversed. The Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, completed January 2, 1900, permanently reversed the flow of the Chicago River, which had previously drained into Lake Michigan, the city's source of drinking water. The reversal required excavating a 28-mile channel through the Continental Divide between the Great Lakes Basin and the Mississippi River watershed. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago documents that this project moved more earth than the construction of the Panama Canal. It was undertaken because Chicago had been dumping sewage directly into the lake since the city's founding. In 1885, a rain event pushed sewage contamination so far into the lake that it reached the city's water intake. The resulting typhoid epidemic killed an estimated 12% of the population, documented by the Illinois Department of Public Health. The reversal worked. Chicago's typhoid death rate dropped 90% within a decade. The reversal also permanently connected the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River watershed, creating a biological corridor that invasive species, most notably Asian carp, have exploited for over a century. Illinois solved a public health crisis and created an ecological one in the same engineering project. They reversed a river, moved more earth than the Panama Canal, saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and accidentally threatened the Great Lakes. That is still being sorted out today. There is one more Illinois institution that acted, documented what happened, and left behind something no one has been able to explain away. In Bartonville, Illinois, in the early 1900s, a licensed physician named Dr. George Zeller watched something happen at a patient's funeral that he could not account for. In front of hundreds of witnesses, he wrote it down. The building is still standing. This is fact number 1. Landing at number 3, the bones under Springfield. Abraham Lincoln is buried at Oak Ridge Cemetery in Springfield under 10 feet of concrete. He is under 10 feet of concrete because in 1876, a network of counterfeiters attempted to steal his body and hold it for ransom. The Secret Service infiltrated the plot. Lincoln's remains were relocated multiple times before finally being placed in a reinforced tomb in 1901. 2 of his 4 sons, Edward Baker Lincoln, who died in 1850 at age 3, and William Wallace Lincoln, who died in 1862 at age 11 while his father was president, are also buried in Springfield. The 16th President of the United States is under 10 feet of concrete because someone tried to steal his body and sell it back to the government. That sentence is in the official record. But at number 2, the crying tree. Among the more than 2,000 patients buried on the grounds of the Peoria State Hospital was a mute man, known only as Manuel Bookbinder, Old Book, to staff and patients. His history before admission was unknown. He served on the hospital's burial crew, and at every interment, as documented by Dr. Zeller in Befriending the Bereft, Old Book would remove his hat, lean against a large elm tree in the cemetery, and weep. He did this at every funeral, without exception. Nobody knew why. The elm became known informally as the graveyard elm. Old Book died of natural causes. At his own funeral, attended by Dr. Zeller, hospital staff, and patients, with Dr. Zeller later documenting approximately 400 people present. As the pallbearers began lowering the casket, those present heard a sound they all recognized, sobbing and moaning from the direction of the graveyard elm. Dr. Zeller looked. At the tree, in Old Book's customary posture, was a figure. Dr. Zeller ordered the casket halted and opened. Old Book's body was inside. The figure at the tree vanished at the moment the lid was lifted. After the burial, the graveyard elm began to decline. Workers sent to cut it down reported that the first axe stroke produced a sound like a human cry from inside the wood. They left. The elm continued to die. It eventually fell to a lightning strike and was removed without incident. He was a physician. He put his name on it. 400 people were there. Nobody has been able to explain what they saw. And finally, number 1, the man who documented the impossible. Dr. George Zeller opened the Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane in 1902, committed to one idea that almost no one in his profession shared, that the people sent to him were still people. He removed the bars. He banned the restraints. He built a farm and a bakery and housing that looked like a neighborhood instead of a prison. 13,510 patients were admitted under his care. More than 2,000 of them are still on those grounds. He kept meticulous records of everything he witnessed, not because he was trying to build a case for anything supernatural, but because he was a physician, and that is what physicians do. And what he witnessed at Manuel Bookbinder's funeral, he wrote down under his own professional name because he did not know what else to do with it. I have read every documented account of what happened at that elm tree in Bartonville, and I cannot tell you what those 400 people saw. Nobody can. What the record does say is this: Dr. Zeller was not a credulous man. He was a reformer. He was a bureaucrat. He was a physician who fought for the dignity of the most overlooked population in Illinois, and he won that fight by keeping better records than anyone who came before him. And in those records, in a published book, under his name, with his credentials attached, he wrote down something that a licensed physician running a state institution had witnessed and could not explain. The Bowen Building is still standing in Bartonville. 4 cemeteries are still maintained on the grounds. The book is still in print. The state of Illinois has never once been asked to explain what Dr. George Zeller saw standing at that tree.